Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back checking out another very cool Jurassic World figure, but not just any Jurassic World figure. This time we have another Mimo Toys figure, and if you are familiar with these, I have reviewed a few in the past here on the channel. They're pretty hard to get a hold of, especially here in the United States. They're obviously pretty easy to get where they originate from, which I believe is Brazil. Like, they're all over Brazil, and I have been able to acquire a few from an amazing eBay store that is actually based in Brazil. And I now have two new figures to take a look at, but we're going to check out the first one today, which is the Indominus Rex. And you can see the box art looks pretty much just as it did the last time around when it comes to these Mimo releases. You can see the, kind of classic Jurassic World look around the box with a nice window area showing the figure off, as well as an image in the bottom left-hand corner of the Indominus, the Jurassic World logo front and center on the bottom, and then the Indominus Rex species name on the right. If we actually turn the box here, you can see the Jurassic World logo on the side, and if you turn the box all the way around, you will see a very cool image of the Indominus Rex here on the back of the box. No actual image of the figure on the back of the box, just basically the Indominus itself. So let's pop this out of the box and check it out. So there is our Indominus Rex, and if there's one thing I was able to recall from my brief moment of opening this and trying to get the tail on, it's that trying to get the tail on a Mimo figure is so unreasonably difficult. I think I may have figured it out finally moving forward. I have to use like a screwdriver to kind of push it in, and that's about the only way I was able to get that tail on. I just spent about a good half hour trying to get the tail on this figure. It was such a pain in the butt. But we do have it on now, and the figure does look pretty fun. I would absolutely say it is a massive improvement over the older Mimo figures, which I feel like, kind of looked awkward overall. Like, first of all, the Indoraptor looked super far off from what an Indoraptor looked like. The T-Rex looked a lot better, but had like this weird thing going on with the hips, and the hips were really chunky and awkward looking, whereas this Indominus Rex has much thinner hips, has a thinner body overall, and just generally looks, in my opinion, a lot closer to what the Indominus Rex looks like in the film compared to the way that, previous figures like the Indoraptor looked compared to the way the Indoraptor looked in the film. The tail is definitely a bit too short on the figure, but even still, I think it's again a big improvement over previously released Mimo figures. So without further ado, let's jump to a closer look and we'll check it out from there. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Indominus Rex, you can straight away see everything as far as like the skull shape and everything goes. I think it looks fairly reminiscent to the Indominus. I think as far as the overall head in general goes, they did a pretty good job of capturing the likeness. The only thing that I think looks a bit off on this compared to what you would actually see on the Indominus would be the skin texture. I feel like the skin texture just looks a little bit big, rough, and rugged compared to the way it actually looks on the dinosaur in the film. It's not the end of the world, considering Mimo figures usually have a little bit of a different look to them, but it is something that, again, I kind of noticed instantly when I finally got the figure in person. Color-wise, we basically have a light gray for the primary body color, and actually very similar to like a Mattel version, you can see we've got a brown that sort of shows up in a few areas here, like the eye socket and palate and stuff in the face, but you can also see we've got an orange eye with a black pupil, and it does have a nice gloss coat. Up on the top of the head, you see more of that darker tone moving along. You can see those Indominus crests are up there. The mouth is sculpted in an open position. Unfortunately, even though these figures do feature articulation, the jaw is one area that does not articulate on any Mimo figures I've seen so far, so that is definitely a bummer. I would have really liked to have seen an articulated jaw. The teeth have that kind of like, interlocking sort of erratic look like Indominus Rex teeth have, so I think they've done an okay job as far as that goes. The tone of color that they've painted them, though, is a little strange, as we have a greenish tone for the teeth. Definitely not what I would have expected. It's like a greenish yellow, but it does also have a bit of a gloss coat, which again is a nice touch, but the overall coloration of the teeth I think is a little strange. You can see a pink here for the skin stretching on the inside of the mouth, though it's not absolutely perfectly applied, which you can see again. It's just a little sloppy as far as that paintwork goes. And on the inside of the mouth, you can see a tongue painted out with a pinkish tone, and it does have a bit of a gloss coat to it. The detailing on the inside of the mouth looks okay, but there's not really much in the way of paintwork in there outside of, again, the tongue and then the outside skin here on the mouth, so a little bit lackluster in that area as well. Moving down through the course of the neck, you do see again that kind of bumpy, almost armored look to the back of the neck of the Indominus, though I will say the figure is definitely a bit muted in the detail up here, and it gets worse actually as you move into the back. The skin texture as you move down here into the side of the neck, though, does look pretty nice, and then the underside has a very large sort of scaly look to it, which again looks just a little bit too rough and rugged compared to what I would expect for the Indominus. There are all sorts of kind of skin wrinkles and stuff as you move down through the course of the neck, though. As you lead down here, you do have articulation in the neck, but it basically is just a swivel. It can, of course, swivel all the way around, but that's really all it can do. It can't go like up, down, left, or right. As you move down into the body, you can see the skin texture becomes a bit more fine. Definitely, again, fairly decent looking, and then when you get nice and close, you can appreciate, or at least I think you can appreciate, the scale detail that we have on the figure. We basically continue to have the grayish tone for the body with only a darker sort of a brown moving along the back of the Indominus, but one thing that is a plus for the figure is that brown actually leads the entire way out through the tail, so that is definitely nice to see. But again, as I said, you can see the detail up here is definitely a bit muted, like it's just very washed out, and also has a bit of a satin shine to it, which is a little bit strange. As you move down into the arms, you can see the muscle definition. I also feel like the overall skin texture actually looks the best that I've seen it right here in the arm, as far as like actually capturing the way that the scale detail and stuff looks on the Indominus. As you move down, you've got the elbow sculpted out back there, and as you continue to move down here into the hands, first of all, the hands are severely pronated, and it almost looks like he's trying to say boo, like he just tried to scare you, but as I'm smacking things with the tail because the figure's huge. But as you move down the fingers, you can see some scoots moving down. You've also got the nails sculpted pretty decently, but sadly, they are unpainted. You do have articulation in the arm, though, which can just basically go forward and back. You might be able to force it to completely swivel around if you really wanted to. Moving down here into the lower part of the stomach, you can see the skin kind of stretching off of the stomach, leading back into the thigh. As you move back, you can see the thigh also sports some muscle definition, and again, some pretty decent scale detail and skin texture. Again, not too far off, I would think, from what the Indominus looks like, but not absolutely perfect. Some bumpier scales, like larger scales moving down the front of the leg. You can see the kneecap, as well as a nice big bulging calf muscle right there. And then moving down into the foot sculpt, I feel like the foot sculpt looks pretty decent when it comes to the way that the Indominus Rex foot sculpt looks. You've got scoots moving down the toes, some nice scale detail on the sides of the toes. The nails look a little bit strange, but they at least do have some paintwork to them. Not perfect paintwork, as, you know, they didn't really paint the nails entirely. They basically just went over them once with like an airbrush. And you can even see that over here. So they're not perfectly painted. You do have a dew claw as well, which is also, again, kind of painted. So at least they did put something there, but the foot, again, just looks maybe a little bit too small as far as like the toes and stuff, but it is a fairly close interpretation of the foot of the Indominus Rex. Again, you have articulation in the legs just like you had in the arms, basically forward and back. Maybe you could try to swivel them around. Not entirely sure. They don't come out away from the body. Moving along the underside, you can see a good bit of variation to the sizes and style of the scale detail moving down here, but again, it's not perfect, I think, to the way the Indominus looks. And then we lead out into the tail, and we do have articulation. Again, just a swivel out here in the tail, which I'm almost kind of intimidated to mess with because I feel like the tail's going to fall back off again. But as you move along the back of the tail, again, you have more of that brown that does actually lead the entire way out. Still sort of muted when it comes to the detail on the back of the tail, but again, kind of okay looking down here on this side, just a little bit too short when it comes to what it should look like on the Indominus Rex. And if we turn the figure around, you're basically going to see the same thing, of course, on both sides. I will say the eye paint is a little bit sloppier over here than I would like, but it's not the end of the world. Moving down, again, the same style of sculpt, same style of paint. You've got larger scales showing up here and there through the course of the body. I think we saw that. Actually, it's kind of muted when it comes to those larger scales over here, but then when you come over here, you can actually see those sort of larger osteoderm-like scales showing up here and there, so that's kind of strange. But the biggest difference would be the positioning of the leg, as the leg is taking a pretty far step forward over here on this side. It should actually be like up here, so it's really stretched out when it comes to the overall pose. And again, everything else looks pretty much the same on this side as it did on the first side. Again, a pretty cool Indominus, a little better than I was expecting, but obviously not picture perfect. I will also say the figure doesn't have the best balance. The best position you could possibly have it in is this position where it's kind of standing more upright. You can get it into more of a crouched position, but it is very prone to falling over. I've noticed that so far. I was going to come back to the review station with it in more of that crouched position, but it stood for 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds, and then fell over. And I just figured it's probably better to just stand it up like this. So definitely the superior position would be standing up tall like this, but I personally would have liked to have seen it more crouched, kind of a little bit lower when it comes to the body. As far as the size goes, I don't know how the heck I'm going to do this because it's so big. I have to kind of have it further out, so I think I'm going to have to bring it back in and maybe reposition the camera a little bit to bring you down to like the tail. And then I'll start up at the snout and then bring it down. And the length is right around 28.5 inches or about 72.5 centimeters. Now the figure kind of went down into that almost kind of crouching position. And you can see again, it's very, very wobbly, does not like to stand up. So let's get it kind of standing back upright again. And then we'll bring the camera back up again. Reposition our Indominus, and its leg is going out, so it seems like the legs are very loose, at least as far as the right side goes, because the figure almost keeps trying to do a split. And then for a height, in the position it's currently in, you are looking at about 14.5 inches, or right around 37 centimeters. Of course, you could alter the height depending on how high up you actually pose the figure. But for a size comparison, so as you can see, the size is very impressive. It's not quite super colossal size range, but it's fairly close. It's just that the super colossals from Mattel are just like unreasonably huge. But as you can see again, it absolutely towers over every figure that is standing here next to it. Then for a size comparison next to a Mattel T-Rex, we have the Red Rex here, which you can see yet again is nowhere near the size of this Indominus. Even the larger version of the Beasts of the Mesozoic Tyrannosaurus Rex, the 1/18th scale version, still cannot compete with this gigantic Indominus Rex. And then for one final comparison, we have the Mattel Indominus Rex next to the Mimo Toys version, and you can see, even though the Mattel version is definitely quite impressive in size, the Mimo Toys version still drastically towers over the Mattel Indominus. So this Mimo Toys Jurassic World Indominus Rex is still a pretty fun figure, and so far I would absolutely say is my favorite Mimo Toys figure that I have. You know, the first two that I acquired, which was the Tyrannosaurus and Indoraptor, I was a little bit let down, honestly, by them. Like, I was kind of hyped for them for years because I remember seeing them when they were first revealed and thinking, wow, those are super, super fun, a little goofy looking, but really fun. And once I realized that they were not something that was going to be readily available here in the United States, I kind of gave up on them for a while, and then came back to them once I saw that Brazilian eBay store listing them for sale and thought, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And when I acquired the Rex and Indoraptor, I felt like they were just maybe a little bit too goofy considering the price, because they are a little bit expensive to get here because of how huge they are. But now having the Indominus here, I can absolutely see improvement, honestly, through the course of the entire figure. There's definitely still more that Mimo Toys would need to do to improve on their releases to really, again, perfect them. Like, first of all, include an articulated jaw would be one thing, but I think just generally studying the dinosaurs a little more might give them a little bit more of like a better grasp of how things look on the dinosaur. Like, I feel like the wrists did not need to be pronated on this, and the skin texture could have been a little bit better on the figure, and the tail length could definitely have been improved. But overall, again, I think the figure still has the Indominus Rex look. Even if it's not absolutely perfect, it's still a whole lot closer to what it looks like on screen compared to the way the Indoraptor and T-Rex looked from Mimo Toys compared to the way they looked on screen. The sculpt, again, does sport some pretty decent detail, a little muted in some areas, but for the most part it looks okay. The figure does have some okay paintwork to it as well. Again, not not overly impressive, but the fact that it does at least have color from head to tail is nice. The nails on the hands could have looked a lot better had they actually been painted, and maybe, you know, not so much of a green tone for the teeth, and also a little more paintwork on the inside of the mouth would have definitely been helpful. But it still, again, doesn't look that bad, especially considering it does have paint the entire way from the head to the tail, which is a plus. It has some articulation as well, but it's fairly basic articulation overall. You only really have the neck, the arms, the legs, and the tail, and it's all kind of like swivel articulation, so there's not a whole lot of posability with it, but it's also, again, huge, which is another plus when it comes to having an Indominus that is just an overall very impressive display piece. This one's also pretty cool, and again, a good candidate for that. So overall, a figure that I would say is worth searching out and worth picking up, but it's not the best Indominus Rex on the market. However, if you are interested in grabbing one and adding it to your collection, I definitely recommend you do, just based on the uniqueness and the fact that they are fairly hard to get a hold of. So I will include a link in the description to where you can purchase it on the eBay shop, as well as the actual website for the Brazilian shop that is selling this Indominus Rex. And again, as I obviously shipped to the United States, which is a huge plus for us. And I think it's actually a little cheaper to buy it through the website because they don't have to deal with eBay fees and stuff. So make sure you check the links in the description. Go grab this if you want it, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.